AI will really help in a similar way to what Bitcoin did, is just liberate the individual. There's really no limit anymore to what you as an individual can do. And right now, at this moment in history, there will be attempts to prevent that, to try to stop the individual from being free. And El Salvador stands for freedom. Like Singapore is to Asia, El Salvador is to the Americas. El Salvador is the pioneer on so many things because we have something that nobody else has. These multi-trillion-dollar companies, they are now referencing what El Salvador has done, and that this is perhaps an alternative to what the EU is proposing. Everybody is talking about what we have passed. Archie.
You mentioned the artificial intelligence and robotics laws setting up a framework that's leading edge in the world and establishing the benchmark. But what in particular about these frameworks are industry members finding particularly attractive about working in El Salvador?
So right now there's a lot of just kind of like when we established the Bitcoin law and then the digital assets law, there was no regulatory clarity, right? Like who owns what is a big issue. So El Salvador established a clear safe harbor for builders because we want to attract builders, right? We're building the new El Salvador, and if you're building a new country, like you need builders, right? So we established a framework for builders and innovators to try out these new ideas because that innovation is happening so exponentially. You need the clarity, right? Because if somebody is going to end up fining you billions of dollars, like the EU is threatening on certain, products or developments or models, then it's going to hinder the progress of, where this is going to take us, what this technology can offer. I think AI will really help in a similar way to what Bitcoin did, is just liberate the individual at a very individual level that you can genuinely, it's beyond just a library. You know what I mean? It's like the world history and the world knowledge and the world talent really at your fingertips that you can, there's really no limit anymore to what you as an individual can do. And right now at this moment in history, and there will be attempts to prevent that, just like with the printing press, hundreds of years ago, they tried to stop that. The Vatican tried to stop that. Well, I think the EU is going to be the equivalent. They're going to try to stop the individual from being free. And El Salvador stands for freedom. We stand for economic liberty, and we stand for the individual. So that's where we fit into the global paradigm at the moment.
So what sort of interest has El Salvador been able to attract as a result of that? And we're talking from, anywhere from investors to industry operators. Are you able to at least give us a hint about that?
Well, I could say it's pretty much every single AI company worth more than $1 trillion because those ones are operating globally. Yeah, very, very senior global technologists and tech companies, governments, everybody is talking about what we have passed because it is, I know, for example, it is being, there's it's rippling throughout Latin America, okay? Because Latin America we're the first with an AI framework like this, and pretty much Latin America has been waiting for the EU. Everybody's drafting a regulatory framework, but waiting for either the EU or US to first establish one. And so most of Latin America has been building a framework or drafting a framework around what the EU is doing. With the passage of our law and our framework, I know for a fact, because I've heard through some of these multi-trillion-dollar companies, that in their discussions with these countries, that they are now referencing what El Salvador has done, and that this is perhaps an alternative to what the EU is proposing. Especially, I think that what El Salvador is becoming is like Singapore is to Asia, El Salvador is to the Americas. in that we are on the same time zone. We're a small, nimble country with economic liberty at our heart, so of our policy. So we could move fast, and that's needed in this day and age of exponential innovation. And we can lead boldly. Like President Bukele has a vision unlike any other in the world, any other leader in the world, and certainly in Latin America. So, where President Bukele always says where El Salvador is going is to the place we want to be. And it turns out that a lot of other countries also want to be where we want to be.
And what sort of projects? I guess, the thing that's really important to AI, energy is really important. Land to be able to build data centers and the permission to be able to do that. Presumably, the framework allows for both of those things. I don't know too much about El Salvador's energy situation apart from, mining Bitcoin with volcano generated energy. Is that a source that can scale alongside the requirements of AI, or are there other energy sources available for El Salvador to draw upon?
We are, we're developing energy capacity rapidly. Before President Bukele, there was no reason to, because El Salvador was essentially a failed state, and it was the most dangerous country in the world, even more so than Iraq and Afghanistan and other places at war. So in the old paradigm before AI, before Bitcoin, pretty much the world was run on manufacturing. A developing country would turn to manufacturing, and that would be a reason to develop energy capacity to, feed the energy needs for the factories. Of course, 15, 20 years ago, what company wanted to build a factory in El Salvador when it was so dangerous and the gangs occupied much of the country or parts of the country? And so now with a leader who has restored the order to the country, provided security, and has such a clear vision of El Salvador as a world leader. This is not an incremental policy that President Bukele has. He has a policy to leapfrog to the top. And he did, right? First, it started with Bitcoin as legal tender. Once he did that, the most important media in the world, which is the Wall Street press, the financial news, because financial news is global. It goes past any politics or gossip or cultural sort of, interest, and it leapfrogs like in the mindsets of the world, in the mind share of the world population. So everybody in the world knows what the dollar is trading at, or gold is trading at, or if the Dow Jones is up or down. We all know, because of course in 2008 and 2009 we all knew when the U.S. markets collapsed, it affected the whole world, right? So when that media started covering President Bukele, like, we immediately became world leaders. We were top of the world stage in terms of the financial press covering what El Salvador is doing, and so we aim to be that now. And part of what we're doing is President Bukele obviously knows that energy is key to development. We need energy resources. Fortunately for El Salvador is that the country has one of the highest per capita capacity for geothermal. So we are, developing 2 new geothermal fields, and we're also now part of, we're developing SMRs, like the small nuclear reactors, the small modular reactors. So we have a vision to go big, go big or go home, right? And that's what we're doing on that. So within the next 3 years, 2 of the geothermal plants will be online, and that will significantly increase our energy capacity. And then the SMRs will be online in another 2 years. So, our capacity is growing. But what we lead in is the vision. And right now, what we lead in right now today is the vision. We've become like a test bed for innovation, because innovation is the most important thing right now. I think in, the US markets, and, they're kind of focused on that energy, those huge, massive data centers. But I think the way technology in the world always works is towards efficiency. So they're building, because there is like infinite capacity for land in the United States. I'm in the United States right now. There's almost infinite capital available as well. Everybody's deploying capital in the US. And so, they're building these massive energy data centers, like 1 gigawatt data centers. They're aiming for 10 gigawatt data centers for those LLMs, those large language models. But, I think the future is going to be more efficient, very fast, very soon, more modular, and the small language models are fit into that modular paradigm. So I think what we have right now is a vision and a leadership to pioneer this space in terms of being a test bed for innovation. And we are developing like volcano-powered AI. We're opening an AI lab, a national AI lab, which will be the first in Latin America with B300s, this latest new Blackwell chips from NVIDIA. They're the most cutting edge in the world. If you have been following AI at all, if you know anything about the industry, and I've been focused on writing our law for the last 2 years. So I've been very focused on the minutia of everything, and everybody has been waiting for these new Blackwell chips. And we've got the first quote. We're getting the first chips, the B300 chips delivered, the very first in the world. Like, how does a small country like El Salvador get that? But through leadership, because it's not like through the capital expense. So there are companies spending hundreds of billions of dollars, but they didn't get the first quote. They didn't get the first delivery. We did, because we have something that nobody else has, which is a leader and a vision and a great story.
So when you say El Salvador is going to get that leading edge chip, does that mean an NVIDIA data center in El Salvador, or is the government actually going to operate a data center? Who is going to get those chips?
Yeah, the government will operate the data center. NVIDIA doesn't operate data centers. They make chips, and so we're doing that ourselves. There will be some. It'll be public-private. We'll be announcing some sponsors and partnerships on that. But yeah, it's a national AI lab, so it's a part of the data center will be allocated to the national AI lab, and this will be the first in Latin America with these most advanced chips. So we immediately go to the top.
I mean, AI is obviously a cutting edge industry. How do we make sure that people in El Salvador reap the benefits of something like this and are ready to develop the skills necessary to fill the demand for jobs, rather than just having to import all those skills? What's happening on the education front in that regard?
Yes, we could be a net exporter of AI services, right? Rather than the hardware or the data centers. Like, we can develop the skill set within the country to export as a service. We are the first country in the world. Again, like, El Salvador is the pioneer on so many things that's why people know our name, right? We're world leaders. People know our name because we have such a clear vision. Hey, I just had a meeting in Washington, D.C. with one of these multi-trillion-dollar companies, and they said something extraordinary, which is that of all the delegations from all of the countries they meet, and they meet delegations from many, many, many countries, and they said El Salvador was number one in the clarity of the vision for the country that they had, conveyed to them, right? That we had the clearest vision for where we were going. And this is like a giant company meeting all sorts of nations. And the ambassador Mayorga and I looked at each other. We were in this meeting. We were like, we have the clearest vision. Wow, that's like, because of course I don't know what other countries are saying or in these sort of meetings, but apparently like our vision is the clearest and the most inspiring. So yeah, what was the rest of the question?
The question was basically, is there an education program to make sure that the students and the kids in El Salvador grow up and become educated to offer, to take up the jobs that will be required of this industry? So
Well,
is El Salvador training the next generation to fill these jobs?
yes, we are. And as I was saying, we are the first in the world with an AI education program for children as young as 6. Other countries are talking about it, like China, like the United States, but El Salvador is the first to actually deploy it. We've been piloting since January a program for children as young as 6. So it's a program we've developed with Kathy Wood's Arc Educate. Now, Kathy Wood, everybody knows, is a Wall Street investor. She's a very famous Wall Street investor, especially in AI and technology. She was an early investor in NVIDIA, early investor in Tesla, SpaceX, XAI, all of these sort of, cutting edge, best companies in the AI sector. And she has this program to teach AI and robotics, but not just like the technical details and stuff like that, but to how to innovate, how to think, how to remain human, how to be sovereign, like how to be a sovereign individual within this coming new reality. Like there's a huge transformation that's going to happen in this world, driven by AI and physical AI. The robots are coming, whether it is the robo taxis or the robo servants or the robo factory workers. How to be extraordinary within that, like how to remain human and successful and still innovate and think and build, how to be a builder within that that global reality that's coming.